Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm your host, Nadia Butawi, for the Healthcare Tech Talk Show. I'm super excited today to have the one and only John Tarantino with us today. Before we start, I would love to know where you're connecting from, whether you're watching us live or on the recorded session. You can put live or recorded and where you're connecting from in the comment below. My promise to you in this live show that you will be inspired in 1 hour together, as I was and 20 other million people worldwide. Welcome to the show, John.
Well, thank you very much, Nadia. I'm excited to be here. I'm a big fan of you and your podcast. So thank you very much for welcoming.
Thanks a lot. So, our speaker today, John, is a man of many talents. He's a powerful TEDx speaker. In fact, his TEDx talk is the number one TEDx in 2023. Not only I got to learn about his work through his talk, I watched it a few times and I was deeply touched by the stories he shared, particularly that of Pat and him, and John and Ralph and Barbara. They are stories of hope, of redemption, and the impact individuals can make, not only on their immediate environment, but their communities. John is an experienced law firm bar association president. He has 42 years history in handling complex litigation and business disputes. He's been recognized as the best lawyers of America and the Law Dragon Hall of Fame. Not only that, he's the author of 11 books, and he's written over 200 articles, columns, and reviews. John moved so many people with his TED Talk. In fact, over 20 million people in 2023. And not only that, he's the CEO of a global precision oncology, IYLON, he serves as the director of its charitable foundation. It's an honor to have you with us here, John.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I want to start with what moved me the most. When I came across your TED Talk through my friend Tara, I watched it on the spot, and she told me you need some tissues. I'm like, why is that? I did need tissues. It moved me to tears. Can you tell us more about the story, your big why, the story of Pat, your wife of 45 years?
Sure. So my wife and I were married just about 45 years, and um, before my wife's diagnosis, she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So it was a very, very serious diagnosis. Um, but before that day, if you had seen my wife, you would have thought my wife was one of the healthiest, most energetic, was a beautiful woman, um, just a fantastic person, always upbeat, always positive, always helping. And that diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer came truly out of the blue for us. My wife was experiencing, what she said was a minor pain in her hip. Um, we thought maybe she had, either strained her hip or there was arthritis in her hip, and she went to see an orthopedic doctor. Uh, they took some diagnostic tests and an MRI, and they found an 8 centimeter lesion in her hip. So we knew it was cancer, unfortunately, but we didn't know what kind of cancer it was. And we then had an appointment with an oncologist, and the oncologist told us almost in a whisper, it's stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And I knew what that meant immediately. There's no cure for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's a question of how long you can live. And as I say in my talk, the first question that the oncologist, who was just a wonderful oncologist and skillful and compassionate, but the first question he asked was, do you want a prognosis? I've given you your diagnosis of
Yeah.
stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Do you want a prognosis? Do you want to know how
Yeah.
long you have to live?
Yep.
And immediately, it didn't take Pat a second to answer. And she
Yeah.
said, no, I don't want to know. I don't in any way want to be cabined in my thoughts about
Hmm.
how long I might have to live. That's a gift from God. How long I have to live is a gift from God. And whether He gives me a day, a week, a month, or a year or more,
Yeah.
I'm going to take every one of those days as a gift from Him. And I'm not going to let cancer define who I am. I'm going to continue to be the same person I was. I'm going to live my life with grace. I'm going to be the best, wife and mother and grandmother that I possibly can be.
Hmm.
And when God says it's your time and He calls me home, then I'll be ready to go home.
Yeah. That was so moving. And then she became the best ambassador, recruiter for
So
Cancer
yeah, so
Foundation.
so so for many years, my wife was a teacher,
Hmm.
um, and she had sort of two different teaching careers. She had sort of the normal teaching career. She was a paid teacher, and she taught in different schools and different
Yeah.
grades. And
Hmm.
then after she taught for a number of years, she decided that she wanted to do something different in teaching,
Yep.
and she wanted to teach underprivileged,
Hmm.
disadvantaged folks. And the first thing that she did was she became a teacher in the women's penitentiary, women's prison,
Hmm.
because she felt that many of the women who were there
Yeah.
didn't have an education, and once they got out, if they didn't have an education, it was going to be very difficult for them. And she wanted to make sure that at least they had a high school equivalency. And
Hmm.
so she went in for years and taught in the women's prison.
Hmm.
She also, in addition to that teaching, uh, taught immigrants, people who were coming to the country, who wanted to learn about our country, who wanted to, learn the language and wanted
Yep.
to learn, basic skills. And so my wife did that volunteering work as well. And I said, the vast majority of her career was unpaid volunteer teaching, but it was so rewarding for her
Hmm.
and for our family, and my children and I were, obviously so proud of her. So after she got the diagnosis,
Hmm.
um, she was really looking for something that she would still be able to do
Yep.
productively while going through her cancer treatment and her infusions and her radiation.
Hmm.
And I was working at the time, I still am, but I was working at the time as the managing trustee for a foundation that helps disadvantaged people, many, people of color. And my wife was always interested in that work, and she came up with the idea that there were training programs in the
Yep.
foundation. And she said, every time that
Hmm.
I go to a treatment,
Yep.
every time I'm in a doctor's office, every time I'm in a radiologist's office, every time I'm in an infusion center,
Yep.
when I see a person of color,
Hmm.
a tech or a nurse or a nursing assistant or anyone,
Hmm.
I'm going to recruit them
Wow.
to come into the training program of the
Hmm.
foundation and learn to do something, better and more productive with their life. So to go from an hourly wage job to a
Hmm.
career job. And,
Yeah.
and my wife was then, and to this day still is, the
Wow.
greatest recruiter that that foundation has ever seen. My wife had a natural ability and a natural talent to have people like her and trust her and believe in what she was saying, because it was all genuine,
Hmm.
absolutely genuine. And she recruited so many people,
Wow.
persons of color, persons
Hmm.
who were immigrants, to come in and get the training from the foundation. And many of those people today, my wife has now passed, several years ago, but many of those people today now have much better jobs and much better lives. Um, I think because Pat recruited them, and so I'm always thankful for that.
That's awesome. I'm pretty sure Pat is very proud of continuing her legacy in helping disadvantaged communities. And in your TED Talk, there was an intersection between two beautiful stories that amplified each other, the one from Ralph and Barbara, and yours and Pat. Can you tell us more about that and how synergistic it was and the impact it has on your communities?
Sure. So they are two different stories. They have this in common, but both of the stories deal with really tragic things that
Mm-hmm.
happened to two men, Ralph and to me. And he and his wife had to go through something, and Pat and I
Mm-hmm.
had to go through something.
Yeah.
Both of which were things that we never would have imagined could have happened to us. We were healthy and
Mm-hmm.
successful and financially successful and successful in life. And two different, very different things
Yeah.
happened that were tragic. But in each case, what I think is the redemptive part
Yeah.
is that neither one of us accepted that as our destiny, accepted that as we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be able to escape this tragedy.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to move forward. There is such a thing as forgiveness. There is such a thing as contrition. There is such a thing as redemption, and there is such a thing as hope. And I believe that in each of these stories, and I certainly would welcome and invite anyone to watch the entire talk. It's about 20 minutes long
Mm-hmm.
to see how um, I think the remarkable thing about the stories is that there wasn't only sort of self redemption, but how they used that to really transform their communities. Ralph, in his case, by starting a foundation that initially dealt with underprivileged children who, for the most part, never had their own books, weren't enthusiastic readers, and he set up a foundation where the children were incented to read, and if they read 6 books that were age appropriate, it started out in the third grade. Now it's third grade to eighth grade. So many different schools here do it now. But it started out in one school in the third grade, and if the students read the books uh, and they came back over the summer, given the books, they were their books, whether they read them or not. But if they read the books and they proved to their teacher that they had read the books, then the students not only would have the enjoyment from reading the books and own their own books, and for many of them, they never had their own books before, they would also get $1,000 scholarship that would be put aside for them um, for college later on. And and what was remarkable to me after that first summer when the kids came back, every single one of them, every single one of them read all 6 of the books, and they all got their $1,000 scholarship. And the first question that they asked was, "Can we do it again?"
Yeah.
Meaning they had become lovers of reading.
I
They
love that.
to
I,
places that they had never been before. They gained so much confidence. And we went from one grade in one school to 2 grades in one school, and then 2 grades in 2 schools, and 3 grades in 3 schools. And soon we had a number of different schools. And as today it's third grade to eighth grade,
that's awesome.
hundreds, hundreds and hundreds of students have participated in this. And a few years ago, those students who were in the third grade graduated from high school and got
That's
into
great.
some fantastic colleges. And those students, when they were interviewed, said, "This program really changed our lives."
That's
And today
amazing.
they're amazing successes. Some of them are going on to graduate school, and it's really remarkable. Now we bring them back to talk to the students, the younger students who were in the seats that they were in once, and they tell the students about how this can really change your life. And then from that relatively small program, Ralph and Barbara established a much, much larger foundation, one that has, you know, donated more than $75 million now to more than 400, grantees in all different kinds of areas, and entrepreneurship and education and healthcare and housing and criminal justice and civil justice. It's really a remarkable foundation, and that's the foundation. This is
And
the
what's the name of the foundation for
The name
so
of
in
the
case?
foundation is the Pepito, Papitto, Pepito,
Mm-hmm.
and Ralph and Barbara Pepito Opportunity Connection. Pepito Opportunity Connection. If you want to see the website, it's POCfoundation.com. POCfoundation.com
Mm-hmm.
is the website. And that's the intersection of life. So Pat and I were friends for many years with Ralph and
Mm-hmm.
Barbara. And Pat became an ambassador for that foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So then, as it became apparent to us, sadly, but it became apparent to us that despite the fact that we prayed every day for a miracle, despite the fact that Pat was extremely courageous and did everything that she could to fight against this horrible disease, it became apparent that she was in decline, serious decline. And we came together as a couple. I talk about this again in my talk, but we
Mm-hmm.
came together as a couple. We always tried to do things as a couple. We made decisions collectively. I think
Yeah,
that's one of the reasons that we were married for 45 years, because
yeah, that's impressive.
we had a really great relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat said two things that I thought were, remarkable, and just demonstrated the kind of woman that she was.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing was, she said, "John, I have lots of life insurance." We had bought life insurance policies, whole life policies, when we were young, so that in the event that either one of us died when our children were young,
Yeah.
we would be able to go on and have financial support. But we never had to use those policies,
Yeah.
um, but we had them. And so Pat said, "When I die, there's going to be a substantial amount of insurance proceeds. What
Mm-hmm.
I would like you to do, John, what I would like to do is I would like to donate all of those proceeds to cancer research so that others won't have to go through, what we have gone through." And that was a lot of money. But the thing that really impressed me about it was we also had just a beautiful home, and we lived in a very large, beautiful home. We raised our family there. We lived in that particular home for more than 33 years of our 45 years together. It was our forever home. It's where we raised our children. It was just a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to raise our family. And she asked me, what would I continue to live in the home after she passed? And I was honest with her, and I said I would find that very difficult to do for two reasons. One would be just one person in a very large home. It really was a home meant for a family. Um, and I just would find it very difficult to live there also. And she said, "I knew that's what you were going to say." She said, what I would like to do is I would like to have the home sold, and I would like to use the proceeds of that sale also to donate to cancer research. And I thought it was a beautiful gesture on her part. We talked to our children to make sure that they were
Yeah.
in agreement with it as well.
Yeah.
And they said, "Mom and Dad, this is a great thing to do." And so we took those two very substantial sums of money and we donated them to cancer research. And Pat also asked me that to continue on. She fought every day. I use the analogy in my talk that people would say, "Oh, your wife is a saint. She's a saint. She's just an incredible person." And I said the truth. I think of her as a different kind of heavenly figure. I think of her as like an archangel warrior, the kind with the flaming sword
Hmm.
for battle against pancreatic cancer. That's the way I see my wife, as a fighter. She never gives up. And I say in my talk, because I would say this to Pat. I said, Pat, I view you as like an archangel with that sword.
Yeah.
And she said, John, it's time to pass the sword to you. She said, I can't fight anymore.
Hmm.
And so we said, yep, I'm going to take it on. But Pat, I don't have to take it on myself.
Hmm.
I have a community of warriors. And so she said, how Ralph and Barbara formed their foundation, we've given this money from the insurance policies and from the home, but can you form a foundation too that will be specifically aimed at trying to help people who have pancreatic cancer, like
Hmm.
and one day, hopefully, it won't be a death sentence. One day, if you have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, it either can be managed, chronically, a chronic disease, or one day cured. And that's Nadia. That's what I pray for every single day of my life. It's what my passion is, to do everything that I can and to work with some of the best researchers and oncologists and doctors and scientists in the world to to do that. That's what Pat wanted. That's what I want, and I'm I've devoted my life, and I will devote my life to trying to do that. And I don't want to
Hmm.
be dramatic. I'm just telling you the truth,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
what I dream is that one day, I'm 69 years old.
Hmm.
So again, just as Pat said, every day I have is a gift. I don't know how many more days God is going to give me. I don't ask that. That's up to Him. It's not up to me. But however many days He gives, I'm going to use each one of those days to do everything that I can to advance cancer care and treatment.
Yeah.
Um,
And for the audience listening to us now, if you want to be part of that, community effort, holding that sword against pancreatic cancer, if you want to donate to that cause, so other people don't have to go through that loss. So it's not a death sentence. Here's the link, givinglifespan.org, for the foundation from Pat and John. So feel free to donate. It's for a good cause that's going to prevent this death sentence for generations to come.
and thank you, Nadia. And what the foundation does, it does two things. It advances cancer research. But
Hmm.
the other thing that we learned was that there were so many uncovered costs and
Hmm.
expenses,
Yeah.
even though we had very good insurance, very good health insurance. There were lots of things that weren't covered in full.
Hmm.
And I was blessed to be financially very well off, so I could pay those costs. In our own situation, I know it's different for every person or every family, but having really good insurance, it still cost more than $200,000 out of pocket expenses over the course of Pat's treatment. And I was able to pay that. Lots and lots and lots of people cannot. And people file medical bankruptcies because of things like this.
Hmm.
And so we not only advance cancer research,
Hmm.
but we also set aside money to fund for those out-of-pocket expenses that patients cannot um, afford to pay. So that again, we don't want to put anyone in a situation where they don't get treatment that they need, or they can't afford treatment that they need,
Hmm.
and they forego something that would otherwise be very, very beneficial to them. So that's that's my why. That's my
Hmm.
cause. I want one day to find out, hopefully it's one of the doctors or one of the researchers that I'm funding.
Mhm.
But whether it is or isn't, if there is a researcher, if there's an
Yeah.
oncologist, if there's a doctor somewhere in the world who finds a cure, comes up with a cure, and I
Mhm.
find out about it, it will be, an extremely, extremely joyous day for me. And however old I am at that time, whatever strength that I have left,
Mhm.
I'm going to shout at the top of my lungs, pancreatic cancer, Pat has beaten you.
That's beautiful. In addition to helping, with the research side, supporting people going through pancreatic cancer and their families, you also nurturing future generation cancer researchers that are from minority groups. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So really across the country, um, there's a big disparity between the number of patients who
Hmm.
are patients of color or for minority groups
Yeah,
and the treating oncologists.
yeah.
Meaning that there's a small percentage of treating oncologists who are of color, and there's a large percentage of patients who are of color. Patients of color, unfortunately, it's one of those sort of hard to explain sometimes, um, but the incidence of cancer is greater, particularly in difficult tumors that are difficult to cure, is greater in the minority community than it is in the white community. But the number of oncologists who are of color remain relatively small. And in our state in particular, I live in the state of Rhode Island, which is the smallest state. Um, it's really dramatically different. So there's a high percentage of patients of color, a very low percentage of oncologists of color. And we decided, again, the two foundations, my foundation and Ralph and Barbara's foundation, decided that that was something that also had to be fixed. And what we decided to do was to fund a program where we would take high school students,
Yeah.
um, brilliant high school students
Hmm.
who wanted careers in medicine, um, hopefully would be interested in a career as an oncologist or hematologist or radiologist, a cancer treater or
Hmm.
researcher, and mentor those students one on one. We picked
Yeah.
22 students
Hmm.
in core city schools in our state. Take those students, put them into a summer program, a 10-week summer program,
Yeah.
pay them, pay them a stipend so that they wouldn't have to worry about getting a part-time job or how are they going to, go through the summer without any money. So we pay them to go to
Yeah.
the program, to be mentored one-on-one by a
Hmm.
researcher, an oncologist, a hematologist, a radiologist. And then they also have group class settings. And they learn what it is to be a doctor treating cancer patients. They're allowed to go in as long as the patients say yes, and every single patient said yes, to
Yeah.
go in on the rounds and work with the doctors and understand, what it's like to treat a patient and deal with a patient and learn from a patient. But the remarkable thing is those students come from the same cultures
Yeah.
as the patients that they were seeing. And so
Yeah.
the patients and the students immediately bonded, a bond that necessarily wouldn't exist just between the patient and the oncologist. And
That's
it
awesome.
made for such a better overall treatment of the patient. The
Hmm.
program was enthusiastically supported. We are expanding the program this year. We were contacted by other places in the country saying, wow, this is an amazing program. Can you tell us how to do it? Can we copy your idea? I said, as far as I'm concerned,
That's
many
awesome.
places, as many places in the world want to copy my idea.
That's
Copy my
great.
idea because it'll help have better treatment for people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was on the other side of the coin when it comes to mentoring minority minority students. We had a program at Children's Hospital Foundation. at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. And where we have a summer program. It's an immersive 3-month summer program where they are mentored. And then they have a project at the end to present as a poster. And it's a very, very popular program to encourage STEM education among minority populations.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think these
much needed.
programs are fantastic. Absolutely
Exactly.
fantastic.
I will definitely tell the people I know at Pitt about your foundation and effort because there is a large minority population around the Pittsburgh area.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you just a short story. So there were many, many, many students who were interested in filling these 22 slots. And so it was hard. It was hard to pick.
To pick.
We wanted we had 22 oncologists, hematologists, and radiologists volunteers, so we
Mhm.
couldn't do more than that because we wanted to have a one-on-one
Yeah.
experience as well as the group experience. So we were limited to 22, and hopefully this year we'll have more and we'll be
Mhm.
able to expand it a little more. Um, and there was an application process, and
Yeah.
every one of these students was incredible. I mean, in terms of their 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 knowledge and their skill and how they were doing in school and after school activities and just
Mhm.
amazing. But the last question we asked on the application
Yep.
was, is there any reason that you believe there would be a barrier for you to be part of this program? Is there anything that would be difficult for
Yeah.
you to participate in this program? And there were a couple of students who said, well, I, I play on a sports team, and even though it's the summer and we don't start up again until the fall, the
Mhm.
coaches want us to practice during the summer. We have, scheduled practices, and, I would need the approval of my coach in order to participate in this program because they were
Yeah.
full day programs. And we said, we're confident we can work with your coach,
Yeah.
and that won't be a real problem. But there was one young woman,
Mhm.
and this was her answer. And she said, I have a very significant barrier. And she didn't know that one of the things that we offered was transportation. So we wanted to make sure that none of the students would have a problem, getting to the hospitals.
Yeah.
So we either had, bus passes or transfers, or there
Mhm.
were there were ways that we would always make sure the student could get to the hospitals for the training. And she said, I have a barrier because I never know from day to day where I'm going to live because my
Oh
family
wow.
are homeless. So I don't know where I'm going to be. It's going to be really difficult
Mhm.
for me to plan on how I'm going to get to the hospital. I really, really want to do this. It's something that I've dreamed about doing,
Yeah.
but I want to be honest with you, and I have this significant barrier. Well, the group who looked at these applications said, if there's one student who is absolutely going to be accepted,
It's that
it's
one.
this young woman. Is
Mm.
this young woman. And the amazing thing about this, Nadia, is there were so many volunteers.
Mhm.
And I say volunteers, I'm not talking about parents of other students. I'm talking about doctors and nurses and administrators of the hospital says, we will pick up this young woman wherever she
That is
is,
amazing.
and we will drive her each day, and we will take her home each day. There were dozens of people who volunteered to say, we will make sure that there is no barrier here. And that young woman had an amazing summer. She's incredibly talented. And in my heart, I believe that one day there's going to be a story, and it may be, on 60 Minutes or the Today
Yeah.
Show, but it will feature her from being a young homeless woman into one day being, a great recognized oncologist. I'm 100% confident that will happen.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. So you've heard it here. There will be a big story that will make a huge impact due to your willingness to remove those barriers. And I think it's that one question: is there anything else that's preventing you from taking you know, being part of this program. And we know there are so many barriers, whether it's at the individual level, whether it's even systemic barriers that prevent certain groups to thrive. So my kudos to you and your foundation to recognize and to remove those barriers. And my message to the people listening, don't be afraid to ask. If she didn't share that this is her major barrier, a lot of you're preventing people from helping you out. So if you are in a situation where you have the drive, you have the passion to pursue your education or to take that next big step, don't be afraid to go to that big name and ask for help because you never know. Everybody has a story, and at some point, they may have needed help too. So, thank you for sharing that story, for helping nurture future generation of oncologists. And representation matters. If we want to help the largest group affected by certain diseases, in my case, I did asthma, which affects African Americans and Latinos more than any other group, it's important to have people from those groups help that particular group. So thank you for that, sharing that story with us today. Tell me more about ILON,
Sure.
precision oncology, and your efforts in there to change the course of cancer treatment.
Sure. So I knew honestly very little about cancer or cancer treatment before my wife was diagnosed. Um, Other than sort of general knowledge, it
Yeah,
was not something that had affected, my family. Um, then it became very personal to me. And because of my training as a lawyer, I would handle lots of different kinds of cases.
yeah,
And one of the things that I would do every time I would, get a case, a complex case, is I would learn everything I possibly could
mm-hmm.
about that area of the
Okay.
law or the businesses that
Yeah,
was representing, because I felt I had to immerse myself
mm-hmm.
and learn as much as I could in order to do the best job that I could for my client. I did the same thing with respect to cancer, and in particular pancreatic cancer. And I learned why it was so dangerous. It's often called the silent killer because you don't many people don't have any symptoms until the cancer metastasizes or moves to some other organ, such as my wife. My wife obviously had pancreatic cancer developing in her for a while before it metastasized to her hip. But it wasn't until it metastasized to her hip and she had pain in her hip that she had any reason to go to the doctor. Um, and so I learned as much as I could about it, and I tried to identify and find out who are the great researchers, who are the doctors and scientists who are making progress, and how can we improve care and treatment for these type cancers and many, many other challenging tumors. And what I learned about was something called precision oncology. And what precision oncology is that it is treatment that is specific not only to the kind of cancer that a patient has, for example, lung cancer, kidney cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. So there are different types of cancers, and those different types of cancers usually have certain treatment modalities. If you have this type of cancer, this is sort of the traditional way of treating it. What precision oncology is, it's something very different. And I wish I knew about it, and I wish it existed the way it does today back when my wife, had to deal with her diagnosis. And we would have certainly taken advantage of this. So what is it? So the precision oncologist looks at the genome, the the tumor, and the specifics of that patient's tumor. Not a tumor like that patient has, but that particular patient's tumor. And they study that, and they use not only their skill sets, but they use artificial intelligence because there are millions and millions of data points in that tumor. And they come up with, they match what's going on in that tumor with what we do at IYLON is we match it to who we believe to be the world's experts on that kind of tumor. And we design an individualized treatment plan, not for the kind of cancer, but for that particular patient's tumor. It's very specific, it's very individualized. And what would normally be sort of this is the cocktail of chemotherapy drugs,
Yeah.
we often say, no, that may be sort of generically what you should do,
Mhm.
but it's not going to work well with this particular patient's tumor. You
Mhm.
need more of this drug and less of this drug. And it also helps with side effects. So you're not, oncologists sort of, I'm not going to say guess, they're educated, estimates of what should be done to treat, but there might be my wife took 5 different chemotherapy drugs. And I know because the oncologist told me all 5 didn't work.
Mhm.
So they were hoping that 1 or 2 would work and the other 3 didn't kill her in the process or have such devastating side effects from those because they're toxins. They're designed to kill cells.
Cells.
You just hope that you're killing the bad
The
cells.
right. Yeah. The
Uh,
right ones.
but what precision oncology does is it makes it much, much, much more likely that you're going to be able to target specifically with the treatment, with the chemo and the radiation, some cases surgery, whatever it may be.
Uh-huh.
That you're going to have it for that particular plaintiff, a particular patient. And the results have been dramatically good, dramatically
So,
good, much, much better than sort of generalized cancer treatment. So that's the good. What's the bad news? Is there bad news about it? Well, the only bad news about it is that precision oncology, because it is so unique and is so specific, it's expensive.
very
It's
expensive.
expensive to do it, very expensive to
Mhm.
do it. And today in the United States, some other countries handle it differently. And the company that I work for, IYLON, is a global company. So we provide services to many, many different countries.
Mhm.
But in the United States, where I live, where this company is located, it really hurts me that insurance companies will not cover this type of service. They will not cover precision oncology. It is self-pay.
Oh wow. And
So, so,
what's the range, the money range for treatment with precision oncology as of today?
so uh, on the very, very low end, it's probably about $3,000, and it can go up to probably 25 or $30,000, depending on the complexity of the patient's tumor and the kinds of treatment the patient needs and the kinds of consultations the patient needs. But it's expensive. It's very expensive. And so I've gone to the insurance companies
Mhm.
and I've shown them the data that we have and shown them that the patients that we have much, much better results um, than they would have if they were getting sort of generic treatment. But not only that, I've actually demonstrated to them, I believe, that it costs less money. Yes, it might cost $3,000 to $30,000, but if you're only using 1 or 2 chemo drugs
Yeah,
as opposed to
exactly.
5 or 6, and you have very, very targeted treatment. And what happens when you have chemo is the drugs that aren't working but are providing the side effects, guess what? They require other drugs to offset the side effects.
And perhaps more
Um,
visits to the hospitals
more
and
visits,
specialists.
more hospitalization,
Yeah.
all of those things. And so we came up with, I think, a very, very persuasive argument to
Hmm.
show that if you allow for the precision oncology, you actually will save money per patient.
Yep.
And what the insurers came back with is, well, there's sort of a wealth bias, John, in your data. I said, what do you mean by that? And they
Meaning?
said, well, here's what we mean, that Yes, your data shows your patients get
Yep.
much better results, but your patients are wealthy because they can afford to pay for this. So they're already getting better nutrition. They're already getting better medical care. They're already in a better hospital. They're already in a better system. They have a better family support. All of those things,
Mm.
lead to that better result. And so we don't think it's just the precision oncology, it's
Mm.
all of these factors. So I'm not a person easily deterred. Okay. So I talked to the founders of IYLON Precision Oncology. I went to the Pepito Opportunity Connection. I took my own personal resources,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I said, this is what we can do. We will form, and we did in October, a subsidiary of IYLON Precision Oncology. It's called IYLON Foundation. It's a
Mm-hmm.
not-for-profit foundation. And the money that Pepito Opportunity Connection put in as a grant, the money that I put in as a grant, collectively,
Mm-hmm.
we put together $400,000 of
Mm-hmm.
initial grant money. And we designed a pilot program here in our state to take 50 patients, the poorest of the poor,
Mm-hmm.
could never afford precision oncology, who have very challenging tumors. And we provide our precision oncology free
Mm-hmm.
to those patients using the grant money to pay our oncologists.
Yeah, I
And
was thinking the same when they were arguing that this is stratified is to have a pilot that will have diverse
and
group of
so we
individuals.
have 50, based on this. I'm applying for more grants now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I hope that by the end of the year, I'll have $1 million to use
That's awesome.
on this pilot program to have more people. But I'm then going to use that data
Mm-hmm.
and say, there's no wealth bias here, insurance
Mm-hmm.
companies. These are the poorest of the poor. Okay.
So you
They
adjust
don't have better
accordingly.
nutrition. They don't have better support. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have, you know, wealthy things that they can go to for treatment. Their cancer doesn't discriminate
Yeah.
between wealthy and non-wealthy. It doesn't discriminate between white and black.
Yeah.
It's a terrible disease that attacks everybody. And
Yeah.
so it's my hope, and it's the hope of the founders of IYLON, that we'll be able, through our data, through this
Mm-hmm.
pilot program, to show that argument just does not hold water. You have to start covering these costs. And
That's awesome.
so we're excited about it.
That's great.
I, I'm just really enthusiastic about this.
That's awesome. We have a question here. Could Mr. Tarantino talk about genetic therapy for pancreatic cancer treatment and research? Is there some clinical assays for that kind of cancer?
So if I understand the question, correctly, the genetic aspect of it, that's part of the patient's tumor. It's the patient's genome. So you use that data from the tumor to design the treatment program. There's also something, some people call it genetic, but I think they're really referring to what's called immunotherapy, meaning using your own body's genetics and ways to attack intruders. There's immunotherapy, and there's research on the use of immunotherapy for pancreatic cancer. Immunotherapy works well for certain kinds of cancers. And in some cancers today, immunotherapy is one of the treatments, sort of right at the top. Unfortunately, the development on immunotherapy in pancreatic cancer is not yet there. So my wife um, did get into a clinical trial at the end, where there were lots of different, sort of unique things that were being tried. They were long shots. We knew they were long shots, but anyone, you do anything for your family member, your loved one. You never want to say, I didn't try something that I could have tried. And so we did try those. There are pilot programs, there are clinical trials, but as of today, unfortunately, those kinds of therapies have not yet reached, the level of success.
I was muted. Thank you, John. We also have another comment thanking you for making a difference. Thank you for sharing such an inspiring story, Nadia and John. There's so much to learn from it, and it's wonderful to see how you make a positive difference in the lives of others. Besides making donations, what are other ways we can contribute to help individuals like the young lady improve their lives and receive proper support and care?
So I think there are a few things that we can all do. We can all approach both our federal government, your congressional and representatives and senators. Every year, they put into the budget a certain amount of money, which I think is ridiculously low. When you imagine, and I'm not saying the country shouldn't have a defense. Of course, the country should have a defense, but billions upon billions upon billions of dollars are added to a defense budget, and millions of dollars are given for cancer research. So again, there's a real disparity there. And there's lots of different things in the budget. I'm not a politician for a reason, okay? Um, but you can contact your congressional representatives and your senators and say,
Mhm.
I care about this. I care about the effect that it's having on my community or my family. And again, there are lots of studies that show that if you are actually able to manage cancer, there are incredible cost savings. Not only on the healthcare side, meaning you spend fewer dollars on chemotherapy and hospitalizations. Those are measurable. But if people are being treated, they can go back to work. They can
Yeah.
become my wife couldn't work anymore. She volunteered and she volunteered in the doctor's offices or in the radiology
Mhm.
because she couldn't go anywhere else other than get her treatment. I thought she was very creative the way that she did it.
Mhm.
But people can go back to work. They can earn money. They can pay taxes. They can help their families.
Yeah.
So the economics of better care and better management or a cure are enormous,
Yeah.
absolutely enormous, millions and billions of dollars. So you can do that. You can also contact your state and local representatives.
Mhm.
And this is the other thing that I would say, go to your legislators and say, all of these insurance companies that are allowed to write insurance in our state, okay, they get to write insurance in your state because they're allowed to do it by
Mhm.
either your Department of Insurance or Business Regulation, managed by your legislature and your governor.
I see.
We've done this with other kinds of cancer drugs or treatments
Mhm.
that insurers wouldn't cover. Go to your go to your legislators, go to your governor, go to your elected officials and say, tell the insurance companies if they want to have the privilege of writing insurance in our state and collecting our premiums, they have to cover these kinds of things.
Mm. And
They're
the
not going to be
cancer
able to write
treatments,
insurance in our state.
yeah, and cancer treatment costs is one of the highest drivers of costs in the US. And by far, the US health system, the cost of treatment is orders of magnitude compared to other countries. So it makes sense to reduce that cost by preventing or personalizing the treatment.
The other thing, and the other thing, and this might not be readily apparent, but if you think about it, I think it will make a lot of sense. The other thing that happens with this kind of treatment, this kind of precision oncology treatment, is in almost every case, fewer chemotherapy drugs are used, almost always,
Yeah.
because you're not doing a generic cocktail. Every time a chemotherapy drug is used, not only do you have, the cost of it and the effects on the patient, but the drug eventually leaves your system
Mhm.
and it goes somewhere. Usually it goes into the water supply. You excrete it, okay? And and there's study upon study upon study of how chemotherapy drugs eventually make their way and have harmful effect on aquatics and water supplies and
Mhm.
plant life and animal life. And if you're able to reduce chemotherapy drugs, they have the added benefit of actually doing something really good for the environment
with the
as well.
environment. That's a
As
great
well.
point.
And then the last thing, and I know this is an area that you have a lot of interest in, and that is artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
But let me tell you something that really remarkable we're doing on the research end. So one of my now best friends, and he's a tremendous cancer researcher, and I only met him uh, because of what happened to my wife. I never would have met him. He worked at MD Anderson in Houston, which is probably the best cancer center in the country. And I met him, and he was also inspired by Pat's story. And he said, "What can I do to help? What can I do to help? I want to help." I said, "Move to Rhode Island." And he said, "Move to Rhode Island?" He said, "I'm a full professor at University of Texas, and I have
Yeah,
this great lab at MD Anderson. Why would I move to Rhode Island?" I said, "Because you can start a new lab here, and you can. There's only 1 million people in our state. You can transform our state and transform cancer care in our state. You really want to help? You really believe in it? Move here. Help me. Support me." And he said, "Well, obviously I have to talk to my family." And he talked to his wife, and he talked to his children, and he said, "My wife said I have to go there. I'm coming." And
that's
so
awesome.
he moved here in December of 2022. So he's been here a little over a year. He now heads his own lab here at Brown University. He's now a full professor at Brown.
That's
He's
awesome.
already he's already published a number of articles that my foundation has sponsored the research for.
Hmm.
But this is the amazing thing that he's doing, working with me and our AI engineers and others.
Yeah.
And that we absolutely believe that, like other cancers that have become very curable, one of
Hmm.
the reasons that they're very curable today, okay, breast cancer is like this, prostate cancer is like this,
Hmm.
is because they've been able to identify the biomarkers for those cancers. And when you identify the biomarker,
Early.
okay, and you
Yeah.
have a test, you can identify that biomarker. The
Hmm.
analogy I use is you slay the dragon before it even
Early on.
comes out of the egg. You slay it before it comes out of the egg because you find the biomarker, you treat that, you obliterate that
Hmm.
before it ever develops into a full tumor and metastasizes.
That is awesome. And I think
So,
I
but,
really
but how you
believe
how do you use AI? So how do you use AI?
exactly. I was going to
So
get to that
here's
one.
how you do it. Here's how you do
Hmm.
it. We have 40,000 tumors that we're using for research. 40,000 tumors,
Hmm.
all pancreatic cancer. And we believe that by using those 40,000 tumors, each of which has millions of data points,
Yep.
we will be able to winnow down and 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 one day find that biomarker. Okay.
Yep.
So that takes years to do that. It took years to find the biomarker
Hmm.
for prostate cancer, years, decade or more. So assuming it's the same thing, we hired an AI engineer and said, "Tell us, is there a way to use artificial intelligence, assuming our data is good and clean?
Hmm.
Can you accelerate this process?"
Yep.
And they have come up with their own plan to go from a decade to under 2 years.
That's beautiful.
But
And nowadays we have the tools for that. Like
we do.
between Google DeepMind and the European Bioinformatics Institute, we have at our disposal 99.99% of the structure of proteins in the human genome. So I think it's a privilege to be in this present with access to these technologies that can speed up finding cures for many, many terminal diseases and chronic diseases. This has been the shortest hour I've had in a long time, John. I know we've had
Thank
you
you
for,
so much.
an hour, and I would love to talk to you more, especially about the AI and its
We'll do it
impact.
again. We'll do it again. How
Its
about that?
impact on, finding a cure for pancreatic cancer. My husband did some research before his residency in surgery on pancreatic cancer, and he's published in that area too. And I'm very interested in AI and how we can use that in preclinical stages to select the right candidate before you get to clinical trials, with the goal of reducing the failure rate before you
Right.
get to humans. So we'll definitely have room, I hope, for another conversation
I
about
hope so too.
AI and cancer research. And with that, thank you so much, John, for your time, your insight, for your inspiration about your big why and all your efforts that you do, not only to help minority populations thrive, but to help with finding a cure for
Thank
cancer.
you, Nadia, and
Before we
thanks
go,
to all of your listeners. I really appreciate the support.
absolutely, and
And
I'm going
please,
to
all of you, pray for me. Pray for me that we will be
we
successful.
will slay it before in your lifetime. I'm going to share a couple links here. This is the link to the your TEDx talk. And also, this one is the foundation that supports all your efforts, a nonprofit foundation for finding a cure for pancreatic cancer. And if anybody, whether you are a researcher, whether you are a donor, whether you are affected by cancer and you want to touch base with John directly, with your permission, here is your email. You can email John directly at john@ilon.com.
It's
And with
IYLON.com,
Yeah,
ILON.com.
yeah,
Yes.
it's I, not L. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And with that, thank you so much for your time. Any final words, takeaway message for our audience here, John?
There's hope. There's redemption. Believe in them.
Yeah, there is hope, always hope. Thank you so much for being with us, John. It's been an honor to have you on our show. On our show.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.